So, hello, I'm Jon Torrens. I teach confident communication, and this session is Speak Like a Final Boss Communication Skills for Games Developers. And I appreciate speaking like a final boss might sound a bit aggressive or imposing, but it's with the confidence of someone who is a final boss. Um, the main areas I will be covering, so there were quite a few in the description, by the way, and I realized there were things like overcoming nerves, structuring your ideas like a pro, tailoring your message to your audience, also pitching to publishers, leading a team, presenting at events. And then the last three I had were clarity, authority, and presence. And I realized authority and presence are kind of, I might conflate those. So those are nominally the sort of 9 areas. And I will drop gems of wisdom on you for relating to all those things. But by all means, ping me little challenging questions and things about all of that, because I intend it to be densely packed with useful stuff, I'm not going to be able to cover everything in as much detail as we would if we had a day or so together, of course. So yeah, feel free to ask details. Side note, I appreciate there was an aliens reference in that in the description, and I got it wrong. There's an error in there, so I feel dreadful about that. So if you spotted that, well done. And there's a lesson there. So there are 2 lessons to this. Everything is a lesson, by the way. Everything that happens in the next hour is a lesson. Double check your stuff. Double check your copy if you're sending things off. And secondly, no one cares. It doesn't matter. So, those 2 things balance out. Okay, so quick introduction to me. Let's see. So at school, I didn't do particularly well. My brain is almost certainly ADHD wired, so it pings around a lot. And so storing information doesn't work particularly well, at least in a useful way. So at school, I liked art and I liked writing stories. So all throughout school, I think art was going to be the only thing I was going to be good at. And I grew up in Cheltenham and then Bristol, did an art foundation course, got very interested in video editing, moved to London to do a graphic design higher national diploma and met some cool people, and left that course wanting to be a video editor. A friend of mine got a job at a games company, and this was in 1993, and got me an interview. And I went there and got the job as a level designer. It was a new company in Cricklewood. And I started working on a Wolverine game, which was brilliant. And I was using pencil and paper. As soon as I started there, I also decided I would try and do stand-up comedy. And this was a sort of terrifying thing which I was drawn to. And so I started doing that, and I soon became addicted to it because if you are like me, then that absolute approval from a group of strangers is quite addictive. People say, "Oh, it shows a lot of courage doing stand-up comedy," and it does indicate a fair amount of courage. It also indicates a huge need for validation, and so that I definitely got from doing stand-up. And then, so I did those 2 things side by side for about 10 years, went full time at stand up comedy for a couple of years, then went back to games, got a job at Sony Cambridge. That was at the end of 2006. And then I saw someone at Sony Computer Entertainment Europe giving a talk, which wasn't brilliant, shall we say. And it just made me realize that they would really benefit from a lot of things I'd learned from stand up, including really good writing and good delivery. And so this idea pinged around for a while. I worked at Criterion on Need for Speed Most Wanted, and then I set up on my own as a coach, which is what I do now. So that was 12 and a bit years ago. And I coach people in groups and one-to-one, and I do talks like this, and I help people with speaking confidently in all kinds of situations, all the situations that matter. Other things, I like science fiction, I like video games, you probably imagine. I'm a runner and I'm married with 2 kids. Our daughter is 14, our son is 17, and I love Blackadder and anything from the 80s. So that's me in a nutshell. Oh, and the Dark Knight trilogy, that's another one, and the MCU. So there's other stuff. These things, there's some nice little signals for you there. You can, yeah, if you know what those are, that's Killzone 3. So lots of things there and various books. Good. So let's get straight into it. The foundation of what I want to talk about, or the 2 of the key things, are authenticity and conciseness. And I start with those because I think if you're truly authentic, you are yourself with as much filters as makes you polite to, nice to be around, right? But you're relatively unfiltered. If you're that authentic, it's way more interesting for your audience. If you're just you and we get to see how you operate, that's just more engaging than most speakers who will maybe not be as relatable or easy to understand. It also means you don't have to be you don't have to put on that facade of being a professional speaker, whatever that, or professional looking speaker. If you're truly authentic, it's effortless. So authenticity is one thing. Conciseness, I think generally people want concise communication, right? No one ever said, oh, I wish that presentation had gone on a bit longer. The same with meetings, phone calls, emails, everything, right? We like short and neat. And once you've mastered that, that's easier for you because you're creating less stuff. So authenticity and conciseness are key things, which I'd like to think we'll kind of run through what we'll talk about today. And yeah, I think that's the key thing. So let's talk about overcoming nerves, right? First thing, I mean, this is basically the end result of the whole thing, right? Is, oh, hang on, I need to switch off notifications. I'm so sorry. That's just, I was really pleased with myself for doing that, and then where is it? Sorry, this is, it's a good another lesson. I told you everything is a lesson. Basically, oh, I can't do it. Okay. Hang on, where is it? Yeah, apologies, apologies. I'm getting absolutely everything. Yeah, I got there. It is. Thank you, Windows. We're going to show that as a tiny bell with two Z's on it. Thank you. Just buried away. It needs to be a big button that says "Leave me alone." Right. So nerves. The end result of all of this, I'd like to think, will be speaking confidence. Right. Oh, that's all right. Thank you, Yana. No, that's on me. That's entirely on me. If I'm enabling LinkedIn notifications, whose fault's that? Uh, whilst I'm going to talk about how to create great material and how to deliver it, that needs to be that end result. And I think the key is understanding what it is, first of all, right? So for me, that fear of speaking is completely normal, right? And I counted it so many times where people don't realize that everyone else is nervous as well. They think, well, I feel terrible about this possible speaking gig, whatever it is. Everyone else is okay. Honestly, everyone feels nervous. Sherlock Holmes, the Cumberbatch version, said wisdom, oh no, was it fear is wisdom in the face of danger, which I really like. And it's just normal. I think it's part of the process. And let's face it, when you realize you've got to speak in front of a group or do a pitch or do something important, there's a little part of you that thinks, I might die. Just a little, I'm not sure, but I think there's a possibility that I may not come out of this alive. And that's completely normal. It's fight, flight, or freeze, and that's fine, right? It's your body trying to save you from something. It only knows physical danger, right? And it doesn't know the difference between a CEO and a saber-toothed tiger, right? It literally thinks they're the same thing. So when this thing happens, it can be quite unsettling because your body, your brain, it's all preparing you for a fight with a monster, right? And of course, that thing isn't coming. So when that happens, it's recognizing and realizing, yes, I'm physically shaking, I'm sweating, my heart is racing. That's fine, that's normal, even though it feels quite unsettling. And I think that a good antidote is to take immediate action, which for me is basically just starting to write. It's just creating the stuff, whatever it is. There's something about doing something physical that's addressing this fear that helps calm you down. Now, sometimes I think we feel that worrying about the thing is tackling it, and it's not, it's just making it worse. But considering it and starting to take action and create something is a really good way to do it. As a species, I think we have a negative bias. So Rick Hanson, who's a great neuroscientist, said our brains are like Teflon for good experiences and Velcro for bad ones, right? We just naturally worry about bad stuff. And again, as a survival mechanism like fight, flight, or freeze from arguably, I don't know, hundreds, even maybe, a million years ago, that was useful then, but it isn't now. And so being drawn to, oh, what if these terrible things happen, is something that we need to counteract. So key thing then to tackle this, I feel, is accepting yourself completely. Now, I appreciate that is a massive deal, right? For me, this is a long-term project. I'm in my 50s. I know I look so young. And it's ever since I was small, there was definitely, I sort of probably had a problem with how I was and how I did things. And it's only now that I'm finally starting to actually sort of, like myself a bit, which is good. So I think I'm getting there. So it's long term, but if you can do it, you're pretty much bulletproof, right? So it's definitely a great thing to aim for. And the way to do it is or a simple way to do it is really looking at your strengths and maybe even writing them out or getting someone to help you with that. So a good friend or colleague can be really helpful with that. And I spent a bit of time doing it. I thought, yeah, here are my positive qualities. Here are my strengths. Own the strengths and the weaknesses. And even better, declare them verbally to yourself in the mirror, which might seem weird, but I'm a real fan of this. Tell yourself, right, you struggle with this thing. This was a problem. This is an issue, and that's okay. You happen to be bad at this thing, and that's fine. You struggle with it. And on the other side, you're good at this, right? We tend to, I don't know if it's a very British thing, but we're not good at accepting compliments. And if someone says, "Oh, you're really good at that," oh, no, I'm not. But actually, tell yourself you are good at this thing. Only if you are, of course. But if you really believe you're good at something, tell yourself this is a strength. I've done this. These are my achievements. So that's the sort of big goal. And that's a great way to overcome nerves. And another little tag on that is reframing nerves as excitement is a big deal. Physically, if you were to ask any physician, any medical professional, they will tell you that nerves and excitement are exactly the same thing. It's just that we tend to think of nerves as a bad thing that we shouldn't have, and excitement is wonderful and positive. It's the same. Your body, your system is excited. So when you start shaking, you can tell yourself, I'm excited about this thing. Sort of self-compassion. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, just telling yourself the good stuff. Right. Let's talk a bit about writing then and structuring your ideas. So this is the really mechanical, practical stuff. Personally, I like to use a pen and paper. I like to use index cards, but I understand that starting a Miro mind map or just a sheet of A4 paper can be really good. There's something about physically using a pen or pencil that I find is quite liberating. I read that I think it's if the more parts of your brain that you're using, so if you're using a pen, there's motor functions that get used. The more parts you use, the freer your thought process and creativity. I'm not sure of the science behind it, but I know that it works. So if I start sketching stuff out, it just tends to flow a lot more easily than if I'm typing or using software. And I recommend writing down the headings on separate bits of paper. They could be index cards, they could be post-it notes, scraps of paper. Get some high-level ideas down. You could start a big flow of consciousness, stream of consciousness. You could dictate that into Word with the dictate function. That can be quite good. But I find as a first stage, you could do that, maybe highlight sections. I've reached the point where I can just put a heading and that feels like it works. So the method I like to use is to write down different sections, different headings, separate pieces of paper, whatever they are, and then experiment with the structure. So if you've done a mind map, you can see the connections and that's great, but it's static. Whereas if you've got separate things, then they're fluid and you can move them around, which is really, really handy. And what's great about this, what I really love, and I think I've invented this technique, I've yet to find out if that's true or not, is that it's fast. So when it comes to creating a pitch or a piece, whatever it is, like it might be something that traditionally has slides with it. And so you think, as I often used to think, right, let's fire up PowerPoint, let's make some stuff, let's make some slides, because the more I invest in the slides, the less people will look at me, and it needs to be visually impressive and so on, because that's how we understand these things work. However, I would counter that completely. And I think if you start on the talk and don't consider any slides or any visuals at all to begin with, you can create something that is structurally sound very, very quickly. And the key there is if once you've got the structure right, and it takes experimentation, of course, but once you've got that structure right, it means if you then decide to add slides, your structure's intact and you won't need to change anything or throw anything away, which you won't be inclined to do if you spend lots of time on it. So this method is make that first draft as quickly as possible. And then as soon as you've got something that works, that feels like it works, and as I say, experiment with the structure. You might have some brilliant thing that you wanted to finish with, you might bring that to the front. As soon as it feels as if it will work, then you say it out loud. So here's a direct question for all of you. Brace yourself. What are the benefits? And there are probably 5, I'd say. What are the benefits of doing a quick or short, high level vocal run through of your talk. Even if it's for a 40-minute talk and you've only got 5 sections and it only takes 2 minutes, what are the benefits of saying the words out loud? As I say, there are probably about 5 things. I've got no prizes for this, but just the glory. You don't overthink it. Yes, no, I'm not sure what you mean by not overthinking it. Sorry, it's very clear what you've said, but um, oh, hang on, oh, we got loads now. All right, brilliant. Okay, good. Right, so pacing straight away, um, breaking initial fears, understanding the core idea. Yeah, brilliant. Don't procrastinate. Yes, so brilliant. So you've hit about 4 of them already. Well done. So first one, let's see, is working out how long it's going to take and what the pacing is. If you've been given, say, 10 minutes and you start writing this thing and you do a run through and you realize my first section is 5, then clearly you're going to have to edit. So it lets you understand how long it's going to take and then forces you to ruthlessly edit this thing and get it nice and tight because you need to be able to deliver all of the material that you want to present at a nice, relaxed pace. For goodness sake, don't think, oh, I'll go quickly because that's terrible. So a few there, don't procrastinate. Yeah, so you're taking action straight away, which is great. There's something about that speaking it that just makes it feel more real. And you're also starting rehearsal, and generally people don't rehearse very much and will tend to put it off because it feels too much like the actual thing itself. Vocal training, yes, I guess you're working out your how it sounds. So it's getting the flow. It's identifying problematic words. Even as a native English speaker, there are combinations of words that trip me up, so I work out those. And certainly memory. You've started to commit this thing. The first version, you might then come back and iterate it and change the order, but generally you're starting to embed it. And that's really handy. Damage control. So when you get a tough spot, you know to salvage it and fix it before it gets worse. Yeah. Uh, there's something, and this is really when you come to the sort of fuller piece and you're doing full rehearsals, but there's something very powerful in stumbling and recovering and practicing that, which might seem weird. You might think, oh, well, I've stumbled, I'll stop and start again, or I'll stumbling and recovering in rehearsal practices that situation for when it happens for real. And then when it happens for real, it just feels effortless. Okay, good. Let's see if there's anything else. Confident in your delivery. Yes. What is fluff? What are your points actually on? How to focus them? Yes. So thank you, Zach. So there's something about saying the words out loud that gives you that clarity and that perspective. You could write it down and it all feels like it works, but then you say it and you realize, no, that's not, I don't need this bit in here. So the idea is you write those points out, deliver it, and then go back and iterate and work on thrashing it out and getting it to the key points. So the output from that could be timings for the whole thing. So you can see, right, section 2 needs to start at 2 minutes and section 4 at this one and so on, which is very useful and allows you to bring the whole thing on time. But crucially, you've started practicing doing the thing that you're going to be doing. And that might seem facile or even condescending, but people won't rehearse much, right? And sometimes people will create a piece, a pitch, a presentation, whatever it is, and they don't say it out loud until the day itself. And then, of course, comes the day itself, and guess what? Things go wrong. So encountering all of those and getting used to it is really handy. Right, make sure anything else. One new message. I can't say anonymity, so hang on. Oh, I see. Yeah, you can't say the word anonymity. Yeah, yeah. Who can? Due diligence is a phrase I could not say for a while. Q&A. Oh, hang on. Input and rehearse everything. Okay, okay, no, I will talk about that. You're right. You can't necessarily rehearse for a Q&A. However, you could consider the most horrible questions that you could be asked. So think about what do I really not want to be asked, and then have some kind of answer. It doesn't have to be something that fully answers the question, but it deals with it. So if someone says, "Oh, are you going to do multiplayer?" and you're thinking, "I've no idea. There's no way you could know," you could say, "Well, we're going to make a decision about that on December the 16th, right? Saturday, I think. I don't. It doesn't matter. If you've got that ready, then it comes straight back, and people don't see the discussion beforehand. Okay, right. Good. Thank you, Games Alchemist. Brilliant. Okay, all caps, no messing around like that. It's a little shouty. I'll be honest. Right, but it's clear, right? That's clear, and I could see it, unlike my notifications alarm. Right. So structuring. And then kicking off with something strong. I said, oh, you might have something great at the end, and maybe you bring it to the front. I recommend kicking off with a question, and then that could be a statistic. It could be, well, there's Aristotle's three pillars, which I'll just tell you briefly. So ethos is how you operate. So you might start with, this is me, this is what I do, this is what motivates me. So what Simon Sinek would call your why. I'm all about problem solving, or I love adventures, or this is how I work. I appreciate that's not a question. But a question could be one of the other pillars, which might be pathos, which is feeling. So here's something that might stir an emotional response in your audience. Excuse me. How do you feel about this? And you show them something, or you mention something that's slightly controversial. And a third one, which is probably the most powerful, is logos, which is logical facts, empirical evidence, logical argument. So that would be, how many of these do you think happened last year? How many players do you think did this last year? Or how many copies of this were sold last year? How many of these things happened? And then people are engaged. They want to know. And then you hit them with that statistic, and then that's a fact. That's something for people to think about. Here's another one. Here's another one. As a result, this happened. Well, we propose to do this. So kicking off with something with a bit of impact, I think, is good. You could just start with a story. I'm a big fan of stories, but I appreciate that might take a little bit of time. I think it can be quite persuasive if you say, I encountered this problem, I was struggling with this type of game, or I felt there wasn't a game that served me in this way, so I made this, is great, because then it shows you're really invested and you're doing this thing for the right reason. So that can be really handy. Overall, in terms of engagement, asking questions is really good. I've done that a little bit, and that worked really well because there's so many of you. It might be that in a short pitch or a presentation, you don't want to do that. You might not want to risk having no response, but a rhetorical question can be really good. I quite like if you are using slides, just the idea, who cares? Just halfway through, like, why should I care about this? Is nice. You're kind of putting yourself in the audience's shoes. So asking questions is really good. Personally, if I'm doing something in person, then I have to ask the audience questions, because I really need that feedback. I can do it, but I did a talk at Develop 3 years ago, and it was fine. But I had a crisis 10 minutes in of my 45-minute talk, where I thought, oh God, I'm dying on my ass, and I just, all the doubts, all the demons came out, and all I needed to do was just ask the audience a question, and of course they came back with stuff, and then we were away and we had some fun. But checking in with the audience, a little question, is really good. And yes, practice answers and what you actually want to convey. Yes, absolutely. And as I say, it may be a slight deflection, but having something ready is really good. Even if it's, no, we're not going to do that yet. It's nice and simple, but anything beats long hesitation, and certainly no freestyling an answer, right? If you're starting to make stuff up, then your audience will be able to tell the difference. And then in terms of structure, last thing on that, finishing off, nice, strong call to action, sum up, say thank you, nice, decisive end, right? It's really important. I've seen plenty of people deliver a great thing, and I think, yeah, I like this, and they go, so good. I think that's it. I think that's our time. I think that's everything. And I'm sitting there going, just shush, you've done it. Just stop. Just stop right there. Nice staccato end. Thank you, and away. And there might be questions, there might not. Doesn't indicate the quality of your talk by any means. No questions at all might mean we got it, we loved it, next speaker, right? We're going to come see you, but that's it, we're done, we got it. Lots of questions might mean we did not get what you're talking about. So doesn't necessarily mean it. Obviously some interest afterwards is good. Also, people might not want to come and ask you, or they might not want to ask questions in front of everyone else. So it could well be that you have some nice chats afterwards. Okay, so last point in that three was tailoring your message to the audience. I don't, my in-depth advice there is do some research, right? Which is pretty simple. So if you can find out about the people you're going to be talking to or pitching to, what matters to them, what's the pain point, what's the problem you can solve for them. It could be you can ask some kind of intermediary. Maybe there's someone who has arranged the event, and you can say, look, what's annoying them at the moment? What are they bothered about? And they might say, well, it's this project, or they're really hung up on this thing. If you've got something relevant that could help them, then that's really good. So, and also, I guess, researching your audience to find out who they are. So I've heard little horror stories of people pitching and not understanding who the people they were pitching to were, and then yeah, it was clear that they hadn't done the research. What I really like about research, particularly if you've got, say, two or three people, what I particularly like about that is, other than it's a nice flow when you say, "Oh, I really like that thing you did," or you reference something that you know that they like and they're invested in, particularly if it's their why, because you can detect a good thread in people's LinkedIn profiles. Is even if it's just obvious that you just look them up on LinkedIn, that's good, right? I'm a big fan of non-verbal communication, all those signals and messages that you send. And even if what you're pitching isn't something that they want, if they see, oh, you did your research, you actually checked who each of us is, and you know our names and you know what we've done, that speaks volumes in terms of I do my homework, I'm organized, I take this seriously, right? So a potential publisher might think, well, this is good. We know that working with them, they're going to be reliable, which is a massive deal, right? Right. Speaking of pitching to publishers, uh, so I've said, yeah, do your research, tell your story, right? Everyone's story is interesting. People have said to me, what if you don't have an interesting story? And I think, well, that can't be true, right? Everyone has one. It's just because it's yours, you're too close to it, and maybe you don't think it's interesting. But we are each unique, and therefore our experience of the world is interesting to other people in some way. So tell your story, talk about what you've loved and failures and successes, and just share those things. I think if you can open up with that, it can create a great connection. I think it was Brené Brown in her TED talk, The Power of Vulnerability, said, stories are data with a soul, which I really like. You could have some very clearly laid out information. There's a nice sequence of flow, but after a few minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, your audience might not quite know where you're going. Therefore, a story can really help. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. It creates connection, it creates relatability. It's just engaging. And as a species, we love a story, right? We know that we still use stories for all kinds of things, and for entertainment, and we teach our kids with stories, and we still tell our kids stories. So a good story really works. You don't have to make the whole thing a story, of course. It could be that you're dropping in little 30-second stories of things that have happened. That's what stand-up comics do. And you can collect other people's stories or stories of people in your team, and you can share those. Those can be really good. But I would definitely get used to telling a story because it just engages. And it could be that's the thing you kick off with, depending on when you're speaking, depending on the scenario. But so I've got to do my nose again. This is amazing. Just, I don't know if it's a cold. Who cares? No one cares. No one cares. Right. Uh, Depending on the scenario, we are used to someone getting up and saying, right, I'm going to talk about this thing. And admittedly, I've done that, right? These are the things I'm going to talk about. And that's our conventional academic learning, and that's fine. However, I think the bar is pretty low generally when people get up to speak in this country. So let's say three or four people have done that. If you then walk up and maybe you've got no slides, right? And you say, 6 months ago, this person was in a terrible scenario. They'd got, this was a problem. And as a result, these things were happening. Immediately you're engaged. Immediately it's just, and you don't know why, but it's just fundamental that here's a story, here's an account, here's a thing. The fact that it's different, if different to everyone else, is a huge bonus. Comic Relief will each year use a story. So rather than saying this many people have died from a preventable disease, which is terrible. My wife and I are watching. We want to be involved. We want to donate. We want to help solve this problem. But rather than just doing that, because I can't visualize 100,000 people or anything over I don't know a few hundred, it doesn't really compute. So they show me a father. They give us his name and his baby, and they give the baby's name, and we're in pieces. We're watching this, and it's just a pre-recorded bit. But my wife and I are in tears, and we donate, and we've been willingly manipulated through a story. There's a connection. Here's a person. Maybe they're not exactly like you, but they have similar wants and needs, and so it just engages. So tell your story, and practice telling stories because it's thoroughly engaging. When you are pitching to a publisher, talk about the team, talk about the strengths, right? Go straight back to D&D, right? Consider this is this team, these are the specialists. They each have their area of expertise. And I can't remember who it was who said this is basically humanity, right? This is basically how we work. We're groups of experts. I thought the whole way that Homo sapiens had evolved was we could communicate and and do teamwork, right, rather than being big and strong like Neanderthals. But there's more than that. It's like we can communicate and plan, but you're the person who does this. I'm the person who does this, right? So there's a reason that's such a strong hook in a D&D party. So show those strengths. You are kind of saying they're not very good at the other stuff, but you're also saying, look, they're brilliant at this, right? They've min-maxed this particular area, and people love to hear about that. And then as a team, you work together and create this great thing. I mentioned doing your due diligence, nailed it, on someone who you're pitching to can impress them because they can see, oh, you do your homework. Same thing could happen with the team. You might pitch a game to a publisher and they think this is not for us, for whatever reason. We've already got one, or we don't, we just don't like it. For whatever reason, they're out. But if they like you and your team, you might find you have this strange conversation where they say, yeah, really don't like like your game, but would you like to work on X, which might appeal to you, it might not. Or they just remember you and just think, yeah, I really like that team. I'm going to watch out for them. And then 6 months or a year down the line, they go, yeah, we like this. Do you want to do this thing? And it was just because you took the time to give each of your team a little bit of personality, a little bit of fun. On pitch decks, I've seen it can be tricky to put all that on a slide. Sometimes it's too much information, or sometimes to me it feels like too much information, and it's always a battle. How much do you put on there? But I think showing a bit of personality, showing individual portraits, and maybe they are a bit fun, or maybe it's a group photo. Actually, yeah, just thinking of it now, those individual portraits can be good with the list, but actually, group of you together doing something gamey, nerdy, introverted, like that to me speaks volumes because it basically says we hang out together and we have fun. Just saying, that's just off the top of my head. And incidentally, I'm claiming nerd, like 100%. Okay, I'm not like that. That for me is an absolute badge of honor. And then again, when you're pitching, keep it concise, right? It's very tempting to throw as much in there as possible. Your main fear may well be, oh God, what if I miss something out? And as a countermeasure, you think, well, I'll put everything up there. They don't need to see everything. The more senior you go, I think there's a pretty strong rule here. The more senior you go with someone, the less information they want. So they might just say, what's your idea? I've got 10 seconds. And I know it's this sort of stereotypical or sort of cliched elevator pitch, but it's a big deal and it happens. They need you to be able to say, it's this game in this genre, it does this and this, and it's a bit like these things, immediately communicates an idea. Now, to you, that's hopelessly incomplete, but for them, it's enough to trigger more questions, right? And I think having different durations of pitch is really handy. So you might have the full 20-minute slides and everything, and that's great, but you know that it's going to be really useful to have a 2-minute one or a 1-minute one that any of you can deliver at any point, just in case you meet someone and you realize actually they would be good to talk to. I've got this thing, and it just gives enough intrigue that they then want to have another conversation. There's a great talk online which you can find called, actually I'll put it in the chat, and I think it's 30 Things I Hate About Your Game Pitch by a guy called Brian Upton. It's from GDC in, I'm going to say 2019. I've no idea. Yeah, it's probably like 6, 7 years ago. It's phenomenal. I mean, he's genuinely annoyed. That's why it's so funny. Like he's just furious about all these things. But one of the things is showing slides on a mobile phone and not having headphones and things like that. So it's considering those practicalities. But the point is, as little friction as possible. That's the thing. As few barriers as possible to get this idea across, which is why I keep coming back to that quick first draft, right? Okay, leading a team. So it's a bit of a jump, wasn't it? But I quite like that. I think some of, or maybe one of the key elements in good communication, and oh, well done, Yuki, top notch, brilliant, it's there.
I'll put in the video as well, no drama.
Yeah, that's it, perfect, thank you. One of the key elements of good communication is listening, right? It's arguably what I teach is kind of broadcasting. It's like, tell them this, tell them this. However, I think, and possibly this could, overlap with talking to a publisher and pitching, but if you're leading a team, actually listening to what's going on is really important. I think when I was in games, I didn't really speak up much. I think I was pretty quiet. I was worried about getting stuff wrong, and I probably had some good contributions to make, but I was worried about speaking up. So I think really listening as a leader is important, and encouraging quiet people to speak up. So in that meeting, making sure everyone gets heard, right? It might seem obvious, but that the quiet people all get a go, and the people who are dominating kind of contract a little bit, so that everyone gets a fairly even turn and is heard evenly. And I think asking good questions is just so powerful. So Simon Sinek, I mentioned him earlier on, Start With Why, talks about, in a very short interview I saw, being the idiot in the room, and that is asking questions that most people, other people, won't ask because they fear that they will look stupid. And so when you say, "Well, I don't understand this thing," means that person has to explain it. So why and how are really good questions. And sometimes you can keep asking that like a small child and get to the real meat of what's going on. And I guess if someone had done that, yeah, maybe with me, they might they might have got to that core of like, I don't, I lack confidence, and then yeah, and then we'd be another story. So listening carefully, inquiring, asking questions, having that back and forth, I think is really important for leading a team. And I mean, I think from what I remember doing annual reviews. This was a very long time ago. This is before Sony, and only being relaxed. Sort of, I'd be like nervous the whole year, and then in the review, I'd be relaxed because I feel like we're just being open. And of course, there was a very clear lesson there which I hadn't learned, which is just let those guards down the rest of the time, and then you'll have better communication. So that's a very brief bit on leading a team, but I think it's a lot of the fundaments of good communication overall, which is being clear, showing your motivation, and with that, it's sharing it. So seeing this is what this makes this person tick. This is what makes me tick. This is my ethos. This is your ethos. Here's how they can operate together. Here's how it can work, and really getting someone motivated. If it's just fear that's driving them, then of course they're not going to last. Whereas they feel like they're on the same side as you, then I think that's really powerful. Okay, right. Right, so the last things then. So I've got presenting at events, and then clarity and authority and presence. Right, so presenting at events, I guess it's a sort of higher pressure scenario of what I've been talking about throughout. My top tips for this. So first of all, rehearse. I know I've said that before, but honestly, it's a tricky one. Rehearse at full pace, full volume. Don't stop for mistakes, for the reasons I've described before. Get used to stumbling and recovering, but go through it. Just get practiced at it. It will feel like a drag, but it's definitely worth it. It will save you in that crucial moment when your brain does something weird, and it will do. Like there'll be that moment where your mind goes blank for a moment. Rehearsal will save you. Crucially, reword it each time. Okay, don't do a verbatim script. Have your cues, have your keywords, so a word or phrase that inspires or reminds you of maybe a minute or so of material, and talk around it. Change it each time. Go in with, I don't know, maybe 90% of what you're certain you're going to say, and then have fun with the other 10%. That way it'll feel more relaxed. It'll be more conversational. Don't aim for perfection. I know a surgeon, which I know is a strange thing to say, and he told me years ago he aims for 90% perfection. And I said, what are you talking about? Like you're a surgeon, you do know what you're doing. And he said, yes, but it's beyond that. Once you get it to 90%, it's finessing it to the last 100% that makes you mess it up. And you have serious problems with the patient. So I rather like that. I think aiming for 90%, that's good. That's really good. And then you can do better than that, but you're not going to sabotage yourself by trying to be perfect. So rehearsal is key for that. Get used to saying the words, get practiced at it, get used to the timings, get used to the pace. And if you can, get feedback, which is a whole other thing. But if you can record yourself and watch it back, I know no normal human being enjoys that, but really useful. You can see how you stand. You can see the pace at which you're speaking. It's really handy. And if you really can't stand it, send the recording to someone else and get them to to give you some feedback, or even better, rehearse in front of them and get them to give you instant feedback. Researching the venue and the technology will save you a lot of heartache. Now, that might just be the boardroom. It might just be working out, well, I'm going to sit here, the chair's going to be here. For a big talk, it could be all about the tech, microphone, uh, lighting, stage, the lectern, the tech, where you're going to put your glass of water, lots of stuff. Get there early and you can tackle all of those issues. You can get to know whoever's the tech person is, make friends with them, ask them. The nicest thing that they will say to you, "Are you showing video?" And the nicest thing you can do is say no, and you can just see them. Now, of course, if you are showing video, then yes, you've presented the challenge and it's fine, and I'm sure they'll nail it. However, go and chat to them, find out, and just get there early. Like they love that. It's showing you're reliable, and we can sort out things like a clip-on mic, which can be a real pain, but once it's in place, it's really good. So get used to all of that stuff. Solve all those problems well in advance, maybe the day beforehand or first thing in the morning, whatever it is. The other thing, as part of this, is to go and stand in the place where you will be speaking. Right? Might seem odd, might seem like you're a diva who needs to be the center of attention. Oh, I don't know who that would be me. But it is really important. So I've done this at comedy clubs and all venues. You stand in the place where you're going to be speaking, and you just take it in. That greater level of familiarity means when you then do it an hour later or whenever it is, it's just helps a little bit. You just part of you just kind of remembers, okay, I was here before. Yes, now it's filled with people, but I've done this before, and it helps ground you a little bit. If you can rehearse in the room itself, brilliant. So if you've got access to the boardroom where you're going to be doing the pitch, go in there and practice, get used to it. It will make you look super slick. And you could do it it's the same in a big venue where you're just operating. You're doing your thing. You're talking, you're gesticulating, you're pointing to someone, you've got some water, you've got the clicker. You look at home, it conveys great confidence and credibility. So get in that venue, get used to everything. It's really handy. And another little note: if it's a really big venue, work out how long it takes to get to the stage. Right? This is a small detail. It is entirely possible that it takes just long enough for you to get to the microphone that the applause has died out. And I think it's a pretty clear, impactful thing when you walk onto silence, right? That is not good. The sweet spot is you arrive at the microphone just as the last person finishes applauding, and then you speak. It's just a little tip. But yeah, if in doubt, get on there quickly. Right. Okay, so last bits. Sorry, something else presenting at events. I guess this is part of mindset and handling nerves, is go outside for a bit, right? I find sitting and staring at the stage where I'm going to be speaking doesn't help. Now, sometimes you can't avoid it. Sometimes you will be in there for the duration of the previous speaker's set. But if you can, get outside and develop being a great example, right? You're in there, there's lots going on, and I find as soon as I leave that door, I was like, oh, this is the real world, right? This is fine, right? I love develop and I love speaking there, and the talks were brilliant, but you get outside and you realize, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then you come back in. I find gives a good bit of perspective. So last things on clarity, authority, presence. In terms of clarity, I've mentioned simplicity already, but and conciseness rather, but if in doubt, cut it out. Right? If you're not entirely sure that this particular bit of information is contributing and adding value, get rid of it. Right? Your gut will probably help you with that. My gut will always tell me, oh, it can often be 50-50, but generally it's pretty good. If I really come down to it, I think, yeah, I'm going to slice and dice that. Get some feedback again on clarity. People generally won't put up their hand and ask if they don't understand something. You might say something too quickly, or, I mean, a particular word, or you might refer to some piece of technology or use some acronym or a TLA, a three-letter acronym, and it will leave people behind. So in that rehearsal, ask for that feedback to make it as clear as possible. And big bit of advice, which I really like, is slow down. Might seem really obvious, but honestly, I'd probably say that to probably everyone that I speak to, it's probably like 99% of the people I work with, it's tempting to go quickly. You want to get this over and done with as soon as possible. You want to get to the next bit of useful information as soon as possible. And you're probably quite nervous, so everything's accelerated. Slowing down helps you massively. So, first of all, with clarity. So, straight away, we can understand what you're saying. You can enunciate each word separately and clearly, but it also communicates confidence and calm and credibility, which is great. And it buys you time to speak. Okay, so slow right down. You've noticed I've slowed down now. I'm talking about it, but slowing right down is really, really handy. Okay, last thing then, and which is related to this, so authority and presence, which actually I've put credibility in brackets after my own notes. And this is really the sort of mindset thing. So I'm kind of going back to that very first part of self-acceptance, which I mentioned at the beginning. Remind yourself of the positive truths, right? And this is to enable you to feel calm and confident and then exude that credibility and authority. And the positive truths are the facts that a trusted friend or colleague might remind you of before you give your talk, whether it's to 5 people or 500. And those would be things like they want you to do well. You know your subject inside out. It'll be over soon is quite a good one, right? So I know that in however, whatever amount of time, it'll be done. Another one is the audience doesn't care quite as much as you do about this thing. Now, I hate to break it to you. You might have some killer idea that you want to pitch, something you want to get across, but there'll be someone in that audience halfway through who's thinking, oh, I wonder what's for tea, right? It doesn't mean what you're doing isn't important and wonderful, but you're thinking about it and you're thinking about yourself more than anyone else is, right? The significance of this isn't quite as great as you think. And that's to let you off the hook, right? So that when you're done, you realize, okay, this was a massive deal for me, but for these people, it was another talk on a Tuesday, right? So getting that perspective is really good. So remind yourself of those facts. Also, I'm not going to die is a good one. I'm physically safe. And last point then, in this section, which is the final section, which is if you physically assume the role of a confident person, it actually works. It's very strange. So, well, it seems strange, but it's completely logical. If you stand or sit, typically it's standing or walking around in that physical stance that feels confident. First of all, you communicate confidence to your audience. Now, this works even if you're terrified, right? So you think, right, I'm terrified. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it through this. But you assume that stance. It immediately sends the signal to the audience that says, I know what I'm doing. I'm relaxed, which is what they want. All an audience wants to see is like, is this going to be any good? Do you trust your own level of knowledge, right? So if you can send that out, that's brilliant. At the same time, you're sending your subconscious, your body, your brain, whatever you want to call it, a corresponding signal that says, I'm okay, I'm good at this, I'm enjoying it, which even if you're not enjoying it, it still works. So I don't necessarily like fake it to make it. That doesn't sound quite right, but it's the same principle, which is you step into that role and then it basically is self-actualizing. And yeah, it sends all the right signals. And smiling is a big part of that as well, right? I mean, obviously don't force it, but if you feel like a smile can come, then it relaxes your audience and it relaxes you as well. So there we go, 149. Well done, mate. So I'll just touch on a few of these points. So overcoming nerves, which I've linked with the last point. I think self-acceptance is the big one. So realize that fear is completely normal. If you can accept yourself completely, that's a great foundation. Structuring, like scribble out that first draft, get that done. You can probably get 50% of it done in in a couple of minutes, 80% done in about 10 minutes. And then you're in a good place. And if you do need to make slides, then you can afterwards, but you do it afterwards and it'll be much quicker. Do some good research, just basic stuff. Google, LinkedIn, whatever, whoever you're talking to, if you've got some names or even just the company, just have a look, just see what they're doing so you don't get caught out and you can throw in some little details and it shows that you're serious. When it comes to leading your team, I think that polite inquiry, just touching in, just being a human being, having a conversation. Perhaps if you open up, then they will as well, right? But definitely listen and just ask to say good questions, but yeah, don't be afraid to ask stupid questions, right? Just ask the obvious thing. You might find it's because we always do it that way, or because that's what we do, which of course is not a good reason to make a decision. When presenting and doing big events, again, rehearse. That's your best friend. That'll save you in the moments where your brain does something strange, and I can guarantee it will. Research the venue, make sure you're absolutely familiar with everything. Most people won't bother, and then you just get this stupid moment. They're going, oh, what's this? Where do I stand? Can you see my, and it undermines your credibility, even if you've got a great thing to talk about. Whereas if you've done all that, it makes you look like a pro, and it's just wonderful. It just feels really good. In terms of clarity, it's just give yourself a time limit and just hack and slash, right? Cut it right down. Give yourself what feels almost unrealistic. Just cut it down to 3 things. That might seem brutal, but it's really useful to be able to be ruthless with your material and just with no emotional connection to it. The sooner you can do it, the better. Then really works, and people appreciate it. Like explaining something big and complex in a simple way and concisely is always greatly appreciated. And then last point, remind yourself of that true perspective. Like what's actually going on? Does this really matter as much as I think it does? What does this person want? Where am I? What does what's actually going to happen? Those truths will be incredibly important. And finally, just stand like a confident person. You might find that you feel more confident as a result. That's it. Thank you very much. I'm going to have another sip of fennel tea.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, John. That's so much to sort of consider and take in, but also, I mean, no offense, none of this is sort of against common sense, really.
That's that's right. I love that. I love your caveat. No offense, but exactly. That's it. And that's the thing. It's a little. I've realized after many years of doing it, it's a little bit like being a personal trainer. In that, what I'm going to tell you is not going to be this magic secret. It's going to be the thing you knew, but I'm now making you do it. So yes, it is kind of common sense, but I think a lot of us tend to shy away. Oh, thank you for your thank yous. That's lovely. So yeah, we tend not to actually do it. Yeah, but
Yeah, no,
that's
you're
fine.
absolutely right. I think certainly around sort of even just sort of perceiving yourself and sometimes, like you said earlier, we're a little bit too self-deprecating sometimes. I think it's obvious that you know, behaving confidently is going to lead to confidence. So yeah, fantastic stuff. I
Yeah,
wondered
definitely.
if you had any thoughts on so sort of analyzing other sort of speakers, if it's worth um, not necessarily looking at speakers that are really good, but if you've got any thoughts on whether it's worth sort of having a bit more of an analytical eye on sort of when you're attending other talks or maybe watching them on YouTube, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
100% all the way. I mean, going to develop is basically a great chance to watch lots of other people speaking, obviously. But yeah, you can developing that faculty for analyzing what other people are doing is fantastic. Even just the basics of the way someone's standing. So, for example, it developed this year. I saw a couple of speakers who apologized quite a lot, like unnecessarily. And I think I went and told one of them, I said, you don't need to do that, right? It's undermining. So it's noticing basically the things that other people get wrong, avoid those. And even just a few of those can really help, like not apologizing or not looking at the slides too much. But definitely, watch everyone and watch the good speakers, watch the bad ones. Find the things that you can avoid, and then any techniques which people use which work, then not necessarily copying an idea, you're just copying a technique, which is good. Notice the way that they kick things off. So I tend to see other speakers and I think, oh man, their slides are brilliant. I need to up my game, right? It's great to do that. So yeah, look at everyone, look at stand-up comics, look at politicians, notice the things that they do, and develop that faculty. And certainly at a conference, if it's a long day, if you want to develop for 3 days, like that's a lot of stuff. You might think, well, I'm going to learn lots, and you will, but seeing how people speak is brilliant. Yeah, very useful.
Yeah, I think certainly sort of sometimes it's helpful to almost remove yourself from the topic. And if it was possible that developers go and watch something that isn't relevant to your sort of immediate area of expertise, maybe that's a fantastic opportunity to really sort of double down on that analytical sort of approach to looking at a speaker and how they behave.
Yes, that's a really good point you made. That where you think, well, I'm not interested in this. Well, that's perfect because it means you're not. You're going to be thinking about all the, these particular things instead. Yeah, it's a good point.
I guess it's slightly harder to watch pitches per se. I mean, I'm no expert in pitching, but obviously we do have things like Dragon's Den. I don't know how useful you've found those resources. I mean, it's quite good at the moment because obviously we've got BrainSpark games on there. But 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 yeah, is that worth watching? Considering that there's probably quite a few edits that go on that you should be
I
thinking about.
So I haven't watched it for ages. It appears that the format's the same. I remember watching it a good, yeah, it's probably 20 years ago, I think, when it started. And I think it's pretty much the same format because it's so popular. But I think it's brilliant. Yeah, that idea of, oh, it turns out that Simon does not know the figures for his thing, and Deborah Meaden thinks he's an idiot, right? It's brilliant. So it's really basic because you look at it and go, you fool, like, why didn't you do this thing? I think it's, yeah, I think it is really useful. So things like if you've got a demo, just put it in front of them, right? And you see it where the dragons love the chocolate, but it's because you've given them an actual thing. If you've got a playable demo, don't do a pitch. Put the game in their hands, and like they're smart, they'll get it. I mean, it's possible you're pitching to someone who doesn't play games, but more than likely they'll get. And straight away, you've communicated everything about what the game is without actually saying anything, and then they can ask you questions. So that's good. But yeah, just keeping it really clear and knowing what you're going to talk about. One of the things that Brian Upton mentions, by the way, which I really like, is like no one cares about your lore, which I thought was really good. Where it's like you're talking about the distant planets and things like it's great, but we don't need that. And it's funny getting that ruthless perspective.
Fantastic. No, it's been really, really interesting, John. Really appreciate
Wonderful.
you presenting on this. I think it's yeah. I'll try and put some of it into action next week at the funding Manila.
Yes. Yeah, wonderful. Right. Well, look, it doesn't seem there's many questions, which is everyone's just saying thank you, which is quite clearly saying we feel this is the end, and it's only a few minutes from the end, so that's good. Yeah, I'm just I mentioned that. Anything else there? Yeah, good.